Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening. Ash Playstead here, Trading Psychology Master Coach. It is Wednesday, the 8th of June, end of the first week of winter here in Southeast Australia. It is very, very cold. I hope it's pleasant wherever you are. So welcome to episode 21. The Mindset Reflexology show, which I am rebranding as the Trading Psychology and Mindset show. Now, you're in for a treat with this episode. The subject matter today is one of my favorites, and I've titled it The Life and Death Struggle Your Brain Goes Through When You Trade. Now, we all intellectually know that it's not actually life and death when we trade. Rationally, we know that. And yet, to our caveman brain, our ancient brain, our emotional brain, the one that flares up all the time in trading, it doesn't know that it's not life and death. It doesn't know what money or capital is. It doesn't know it's in the 21st century and there's not a saber-toothed tiger hiding behind every bush. So when you trade, it literally is life and death. Your emotional brain is triggered into survival in the moment. And that is life and death. That is, folks, the number one primary first principle purpose of your emotional brain is to keep you alive in the moment, survival. And it's served us as a species incredibly well. But in trading, it is a big problem. So it's a super interesting episode. So let's dive in a little bit further. As usual, I have my notes. I really want to hit the mark with the content of this episode. So I'll read from my notes. Any questions, throw them into the chat, either live or later. This episode is streaming live to LinkedIn and YouTube. And of course, this episode, as with all episodes, will reside over on my YouTube channel, Trading Psychology and Mindset on YouTube. Look it up, get over there, subscribe, and catch all the episodes. So have you ever noticed how difficult it is to maintain control, emotional control, when you put capital at risk? So, as I said, intellectually, you sit there and you understand there's something very, very well trading. And you know that, okay? I've done this charting. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what I'm looking for. And I know the conditions and all of that stuff. All I have to do is get the thing planned, and then I'm going to go in, I'm going to wait until the trading opportunity shows up, and then whammo, I'm going to execute. Now, practically every trader I've worked with has the concept of success figured out on that intellectual level. They know how to trade, they've done the training junkie phase, and they have learned what they believe they need to learn. Yet, guess what? That's the thinking brain. That's the thinking brain that isn't connected to the emotions. It's just sitting there, and it's sitting on a throne, basically, and it thinks it rules the whole mind, and it doesn't realize that it's actually sharing power. Then all of a sudden, that intellectual stuff, it goes from planning the game day to actual game day, where the money is real and there's no reset button. And suddenly that risk is there, that uncertainty is there. And all of a sudden the thinking brain is not alone. All of a sudden the emotional brain and all those survival instincts that I was mentioning earlier, that the emotional brain embeds, they fire up and it starts looking out and it sees danger. Now, this is the really important thing. And why is it so important? Why can't I just control my emotions by snapping my fingers? Well, the truth is this. As I said, the vital first principle to accept here is that your thinking brain does not communicate directly with the emotional brain. It actually has to learn to calm down first. It has to learn that, the emotional brain's there, and I need to incorporate that part of me into my decision making. But meanwhile, of course, what happens is that the emotional brain has a completely different agenda than the profit motive of the thinking brain. The agenda is to stay alive this moment. Now, what do you think is going to happen when that caveman brain is suddenly put face to face with uncertainty? I think you know. That circumstance instantly produces a sense of vulnerability in the caveman brain. And it sits there totally reactive in that vulnerability, in that confusion. And guess what? Danger. That is the programming, the hot-wired programming that we carry from our caveman ancestral days to this modern brain, this modern human being of ours that we take to trading. We don't realize we're taking that caveman brain, that emotional brain that's really focused on survival. We think and we fall into the total acceptance and believe that we think, therefore we are. Now, I would say no, that's incorrect. Rene Descartes, the philosopher, was incorrect when he said, I think, therefore I am. I say no, the truth is we're not thinking creatures. We are emotional creatures who have the ability to think reasonable. So we are not rational creatures who have emotions. That's what the thinking brain has got all wrong. That's what 95% of traders have got wrong. They think that they are thinking creatures who have emotions, when it's the opposite of that. That is the big shift that needs to be made. And until you make that shift, you're always going to have this conflict of interest between your thinking brain and your emotional brain. Now, your thinking brain wants to be able to execute its plan, right? It wants to be able to make money. You want all of that stuff. You've got a plan, execution. Yep, we're going to do this. And all you have to do is move through this and intellectually understand, yes, of course, there's going to be losses. We all intellectually understand that is part of the game of trading. Everybody knows that. And therein lies one of the great intellectual deceptions of trading, right? The clash here is that the emotional brain says, oh, this is a life and death struggle. It doesn't know we're in the 21st century. It is still thousands and thousands, millions of years ago, where uncertainty, things showing up, were perceived as, firstly, threat until proven otherwise. Because there were a lot of threats back in those ancient days. Lots of other creatures were out there who wanted you as their meal. So now I hope you see the dilemma. We have a thinking brain that we bring into trading that's totally unprepared to add the risk, the capital risk that triggers that emotional brain for survival. And that is simply the way it is. That is not the anomaly. That is the way it is. So I'll give you an example of this. I have a client and he's looking at this situation. He's looking at his charts and he's got his plan, right? And then he's just watching, waiting for something to show up. And then something shows up in his charts. Then it starts getting warm. Still no big deal. Whether or not it forms into a live trade or not, he doesn't know. But when it comes and suddenly it's formed, it's there. And besides all of that, these things, his plan, his research, his strategy, they all converge on this. And all these things that say, oh, this is a hot one. All of the thinking, all the research, all the planning, all the charting, boom, all of a sudden a trade shows up and he's going, this is a hot one. This may be the big one of the month. I better go for it. And suddenly there is Andy, because that's his name, Andy, going, I'm going to make some money. I'm going to make some money. He's getting excited. He's getting excited. Everything is going his way. All the numbers, everything is lined up. So he gets into the trade. All good so far. But guess what? Then it starts bouncing around on him and bouncing around more. And then it nosedives down towards his stop loss. I bet you've all experienced this, traders. Meanwhile, he is sitting there going, uh-oh, oh no, I'm not going to lose this one. This is a ride I want to be on. I know it, I know it, I know it. Now, do you hear that survival brain kicking in, taking over the thinking brain? In trading, you don't know anything. It exists purely as potential and possibility, and he knows it. So what he does is he moves his stop, and then he keeps on going. He moves it again. And I think you know where this is heading. Before you know it, guess what? He crashes and burns. So here we go. What happened is Andy did not recognize the input or what the criterion that the emotional brain was judging by. And he slammed, boom, straight into it. And even though he intellectually knew what he was doing, he was not connected to his emotional half. We've got to remember the brain is essentially divided into two parts, a right brain and a left brain. And the right brain, that emotional center, let me tell you, it has got some serious might and power. And Andy just found out, exactly that, and it hijacked him. That's what it looks like. Your emotional brain has survival instincts that are not going to go away. You're not going to train the subconscious into laying down, backing down, when there is a threat perceived through risk. What you can do, though, the good news, is you can begin to say, you know something? I think I'm beginning to understand my emotional brain better. It's rooted in survival instincts, and those survival instincts don't know they're in the 21st century. This would be something I would highly encourage you to become or to make it one of your mantras. Say to yourself, you know what? I'm beginning to understand my emotional brain better. Emotional intelligence. It is rooted and will always be rooted in survival instincts, which is a good thing. If you're in a car is suddenly heading towards you, if you trip and you look like you're about to fall over and hurt yourself, if someone tries to attack you, for all of these reasons and many others, that survival instinct is incredibly important. But it's the opposite in trading. And therein, as I said, is the big challenge. So what we're going to have to start doing is saying, okay, I'm carrying an emotional brain into trading with me, whether I like it or not. And all of those guys, that are out there telling me, in the trading industry, just leave your emotions at the door, just park your emotions at the door. It doesn't work that way. Correct. It doesn't work that way. And then what you discover very quickly is this. The very brain that you brought to trading, the one that allowed you to survive for millennia, that allowed the species of ours to be who we are, that one, right? The one that in the thinking brain, we sit on that throne and we think we're in control. Suddenly what happens in trading, it discovers it's not in control. And that is where it all begins and it all ends. And we have to look at those survival instincts. We have to learn how to manage them. And in managing them, we also have to build, and this is key, awareness is part, managing and regulating emotions is another part, and then we have to build an intentional mind that is very different than the one we brought to trading. So the challenge, which I see as the opportunity, obviously, is how do you go about managing that emotional brain so that it doesn't short circuit the thinking brain, which, by the way, it does really, really quickly, just like that. 0.06 of a second is how quickly the emotional brain acts to overrun the thinking brain. Now, if the emotional brain perceives threat in that risk, it's going to trigger the survival instincts and it's going to hijack the thinking brain as if it wasn't even there. It just washes it away. And as I've said many times, that is a good thing in our evolution because it allowed us to react instantly in a way that we didn't need to think so that we could survive. And we still got that brain. But like a big ocean wave, it is completely unstoppable, implacable, and impervious to you trying to avoid. It's just precisely what happened to Andy, the trader I was speaking about. Now, where does this start? How do you begin once you grasp that you're going to be bringing this emotional brain with you and that you need to learn how to reshape it in the way that it engages with uncertainty? Because you must understand, right? It's going to perceive uncertainty as a dangerous threat unless you go in and retrain it. And the first step towards that is emotional regulation, which I think you've probably worked out by now. And when we grasp that emotions are not psychological, that they are biological, they're what's called biological action potentials, BAPs. Their job is to basically control the work or the cooperation between you as an organism, the trader, and the environment that you're in, the markets. And anytime there's a change out there in the status of the markets, automatically an emotion is going to erupt. Now I say, don't fear it, welcome it, embrace it. I want you to understand that the first step is this: you regulate the emotion, you don't avoid it. You accept it, you embrace it, you regulate it, you disrupt it. And how do you disrupt it? You disrupt it by breath and by tension release. Because what we discover is that breath and tension in our body are part of the biology. So this phase 1 is called emotional arousal. That is what you're feeling, your emotional fingerprint right there. It is as much a part of you as any other, vital organ, your heart, your lungs, your skin. And the moment that we can start diaphragmatically breathing all the way down into our belly, which pulls air into the very lower lobes of our lungs, start getting oxygen. We reroute the fight-flight impulse. That's what this is about. Because what happens with emotional arousal is your body instantly starts to take energy away from the brain and focus on the large muscle groups ready for action. That's what it's wired to do. Now, we need to disrupt that, and we disrupt that with tension release and breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, whereby pulling oxygen down into the lower lobes of our lungs, we can reroute the oxygen and the glucose back to the brain and away from the big muscles. That is a key step. So we've got to move that way, but that's not enough. That's just the start to disrupt the emotional avalanche. So simply stated, emotional regulation is going to get you to the door of the mind. It's not going to open the door and look in. That's where we move to the next step, which is what I teach, which is called applied mindfulness. Now, not only is it mindfulness, it's next level mindfulness, where what you're looking to do, you learn to understand how you got shaped as a brain to engage uncertainty. And you begin to realize one very powerful thing, that you and your thoughts are not the same. You and your beliefs are not the same. All there is simply potential that the brain has organized into a particular self that allowed you to survive. Now, I hope that makes sense. And it just so happens that the particular self that you are now is not going to make it in trading. This is why 95% plus of traders fail, because the particular organization of self that they are now is not built and designed to flourish in trading. And unless it's changed and rebuilt, it won't work. So we're going to have to get our limbic system to dissolve that potential back into the ocean of potential from which it came, and to organize it so it's focused on being able to engage uncertainty and work well with uncertainty. So that first step, those two parts, emotional regulation and learning to understand who the players are in your mind. What we're looking for is not just trigger to fear based on trigger to aggression, of these two, triggering to fear or triggering to aggression, which is fight-based trading. What we're looking to do is to find a different place, okay, so that we can see that this whole trading scenario is emotional state dependent. So what we want is we want to create emotions that create the mind that engages uncertainty differently. I want to repeat this. What we want to do is we want to create emotions that create the mind that engages uncertainty. We want to create and bring forth the ones that work, folks, the part of us, the emotional programmings that work to manage uncertainty, to manage probability of trading. And the ones that do this best are these 4 big ones. Now, I talk about and I train these a lot more in my work, but just to touch on them here: the discipline of a ruler, the courage of a warrior, and the big one, the self-soothing of a caregiver. Without that one, none of the others are possible. Self-soothing of a caregiver, and the impartiality, the clear thinking of a sage. So, what I do in my work is I guide and train traders to organize themselves in order to be able to pull those 4 emotional programs up. Now, that allows thinking to come out of that in a way that engages uncertainty correctly. No longer is uncertainty and probability seen as a threat that your emotional brain, if left to its own devices, will trigger straight to its survival emotions. Suddenly, what you're now doing is you're seeing it from a probability standpoint, where you see the edge in your method, and as long as you can produce the edge psychologically, which you're doing by inventing this self that engages from discipline, from courage, from self-soothing, and from impartiality, you're creating the mind from the brain that engages uncertainty in a very powerful way. It's not about winning or losing anymore. It's about performing in the moment. And this is the way that you do it. This is called mindset reflexology, which is my bespoke technology, this process to create the emotional programmings from the brain that create the mind that reacts with probability and uncertainty in the correct way under pressure. Teaching and training your brain and mind to reflex in a new and better way. Best of all, this is learnable. It's not a foreign skill that I think a lot of people have the false belief that I'm just the way I am. I can't change my brain. I can't reshape my brain. That is incorrect. This is one thing that we have learned over the last decade or two, that we can always reshape our potential. We can always reshape the way our brain works to produce the mind that produces the reality that we experience. We can learn to move away from the old way that your brain wants to utilize, that it's been behaving for thousands and thousands of years. You can retrain it to work from a very different emotional ground that literally gives you the psychological edge that drives your method edge. So, my friends, that's what this work is all about. It's training you to literally recognize that you can shape your brain. It's no longer natural selection shaping it. You're interfering with natural selection, which in the trading world is a good thing. You're adapting your own brain for the purposes of working with uncertainty. That is self-mastery. If you want to know the definition of self-mastery, that is it. Adapting your own brain for the purposes of working with uncertainty. So come and explore more. Come and have a look at my YouTube channel. Check out my website. Check out the other videos. My aim is to educate, to explore these topics, to provide ways and learnings for you to take on board to improve your psychology, to improve your mindset, so you have the ability to execute your method with an edge flawlessly. Come and see just how truly you can become the master of your own destiny, which is why a lot of us get into trading in the first place, and control the mind that engages that uncertainty when risk is involved. Okay, that's the end of this episode on the life and death struggle that our brain goes through. I hope that I've explained that well, and that you can take some really, really useful gold nuggets away from this episode. Wherever you may be in the world, happy trading. If you're not a trader and you're just curious, check out more videos. And if you want to get into trading, it is the greatest game on earth. It is the most amazing thing. I love it. I'm sure you all love it. Have a fantastic week ahead, and I'll see you on the next episode.